This episode is brought to you by Hyundai. Think you know what an electric vehicle should be? Think again. From the charge time and range in the Ioniq 5 and 6 to the 601 horsepower Ioniq 5N, Hyundai is redefining what EVs should be. Learn more about Hyundai EVs at HyundaiUSA.com. EPA estimated 303-mile driving range for 2024 Ioniq 5 SE SEL limited rear-wheel drive and 361-mile driving range for 2024 Ioniq 6 SE long-range rear-wheel drive with fully charged battery. Actual range may vary.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
In 2019, director Todd Phillips and star Joaquin Phoenix gave the world the darkest film we have ever watched.
In 2025, we take a return trip to Scotland for the first time in weeks.
I like the way you put that. Like we just hang out in Scotland pretty often.
It's been too long, Brad.
Too long. The film is Joker.
The whiskey is Benromach 10-year.
And we'll review them both. This is the Film and Whiskey Podcast.
Welcome to the Film and Whiskey Podcast, where each week we review a classic movie and a glass of whiskey. I'm Bob Book.
I'm Brad G.
And this week we're throwing it back about 5 years here, Brad. Well, a little more than 5 years, I guess, which is crazy to think about. I remember when Joker came out, obviously, but it was pre-COVID. And those COVID years, we've said it many times on this podcast, just really screwed with my perception of time. It's weird to think that this movie's already been out for 5 years, because it feels like it was, maybe 2 years ago. I don't know. Maybe it's just me.
Yeah, I mean, according to Tarantino, 2019 was the last year that cinema existed. Mm-hmm. So this just feels like an epoch ago.
Which is crazy, because Tarantino also happened to just release a movie in 2019. He got his movie in just under the wire before cinema died. Yeah.
Funny how that happened.
What a coincidence. All right, so today we're looking at Joker. And folks, I'm going to lay all my cards out on the table right after this little teaser. Welcome into Film and Whiskey. If this is your first time listening to us, we talk about movies, we talk about whiskey. This season, we're looking at movies from the last 20 years, and we're asking the question, does this movie deserve to be considered a modern masterpiece? Joker is a really interesting document, Brad, of, I guess, the late 2010s, early 2020s. It's, obviously still really relevant to our times. They just came out with the sequel this past year that was pretty universally panned and flopped hard at the box office. So Joker is still somewhat top of mind for people. But I wanted to lay my cards out on the table by saying this, Brad. I watched this movie. I think it's a pretty well-made movie. I don't have quite the visceral hate for it that it seems like a lot of movie critics have. But I will say that I don't know if I've ever been less excited to start watching a movie for our show. I definitely, at multiple points this week, could have started this movie and just decided against it. Because you really gotta get yourself in a specific frame of mind to take in this movie.
Yeah, I watched this film maybe a year ago and was impressed with a lot of the craft of the film and highly unimpressed with the message. So coming into it this time, I was really curious where I would be. I don't know if I quite had the trepidation to get into it that you did. It's definitely a hard movie to make yourself watch.
Yeah, and it's not filmed with the sort of hatred for humanity that someone like a David Fincher has. But it definitely reminds me of watching a movie like Seven, where you just come out of that movie and you feel real icky and you feel like you need a shower. And there's not a lot of rays of hope happening at the end of this movie. So we're going to dive into it. We're going to talk about it a lot. But Brad, I'm really curious to hear what you think of Joker. So maybe for the earliest time this season, we're at the 4-minute mark. I think let's just jump right in and let's get into Brad Explains.
Brad's gonna give us the movie plot with only 60 seconds ticking on the clock. So let's go ahead and hear your take with this little segment that we call Brad Explains.
Brad Explains is the part of the show where Brad breaks down the plot of the film that he has just seen, often for the first time. Now, this is, of course, Brad's second time watching this film. It's not really a super complicated plot, Brad, and we will discuss how it seems to be a plot that's reused a lot. But it should be something that you can handle in 60 seconds, no?
I think I have this, Bob.
By the way, nice sultry voice you have there today, Brad.
That's what happens when you get sick, Bob.
Dude, I have never gotten sick with the frequency that I do now after having children. It's like, and I thought that it worked such that like kids get sick a lot because their immune systems haven't built up the tolerance. But yeah. I, as an adult, should have the tolerance. Like, why am I getting sick all the time?
Yeah, it's because kids are dirty. And not only do they fray your last nerve, they also fray your bodily health. It's wild.
And that's our endorsement for parenthood, folks.
Dude, if anybody's out there listening, have kids. It's the absolute best thing in the world. Yeah, you get to sound like this, Bob.
You gave such a glowing endorsement that I'm sure that really rings true with most people now. All right, Brad, let's dive into Joker. So you have 60 seconds on the clock. Folks, we are going to spoil this whole movie, so if you haven't gotten around to seeing the Best Picture nominee, Joker, hit pause, go watch the film, and then come back and rejoin us for the rest of the episode. Brad, 1 minute and go.
Joker is a film about an evil society that tramples a poor man into absolute terror.
The end.
The end.
Boom.
Bad society. Bad society.
Okay, how do we want to frame today, Brad? I've been kind of sending you little tiny fragments of thoughts I have on this movie throughout the day, and I have so many thoughts, but I don't really know how to construct an episode out of them. It feels weird to just jump into like performances because there's really only one performance we need to talk about in the movie. And obviously Joaquin wins Best Actor for this movie. I think we would both agree that he does a pretty phenomenal job, right? Like I don't have any complaints about his performance. I have lots of complaints, lots of thoughts about the movie that he is in.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't you just kick us off, man?
I think we need to spend at least 10 minutes talking about Sam Morrill and his role in the film.
Who is that?
He's the... you've never heard Sam Morrill?
No.
Oh, bro, I thought you were in a stand-up. He's the comedian that's on stage right before Joaquin goes up, and he's talking about you know, how men and women view sex.
You know what? There's also a comedian before him, Gary Goldman, who's like a long time working comedian that was in the movies. I was like, oh, I recognize him. Okay, so there you go. Let's talk about stand-up comics who make brief cameos, but not crucially Joaquin Phoenix.
Nah. So here's the thing. Here's the thing with Joaquin. Like, he reflects the absolute... I mean, obviously, he sets the tone. But in a lot of ways, I feel like this whole movie is an overindulgence. And his performance is just that. Now, am I saying it's a bad performance? Like, not in any stretch of the imagination. I think Joaquin does incredible things. I think his ability to have like 3 different laughs for the Joker based on like what's going on around him is incredible. The scene where he kills Randall and then is helping the dwarf that is also a clown get out of the apartment. I think Joaquin just freaking knocks it out of the park, dude. Mm-hmm. But I think my struggle with this film will never be, I don't know if I can separate the darkness of this film and the message that I think is so wrong and terrible from Joaquin's performance.
Well, then maybe let's just go ahead and start diving into messaging in this movie, because I've been really struggling with why the movie doesn't totally click for me. Why doesn't it work? And why do I feel like this movie is irresponsible in the way that it handles its themes. Because, I was saying earlier that it kind of lifts plot elements, and the thing that it was most accused of copying off was early Scorsese, especially a movie called The King of Comedy, and then prior to that, Taxi Driver. And the movie really does follow the structure of Taxi Driver. And so I understand that people accuse it of ripping those movies off. I don't necessarily think it does that. I didn't think so on this viewing, at least. But when I compare it to a movie like Taxi Driver, the reason Taxi Driver works is because from the very beginning of the movie, not only do you understand that Travis Bickle is an unstable person, but you never view him or anything he does in terms of like heroic framing. They never use the language of film to establish his actions as heroic. And so even at the end of the movie, when you have that kind of like darkly humorous epilogue where it turns out Travis didn't die, and not only did he not die, but he's getting like letters of commendation and being viewed as a hero by the public, it's like, oof, that it hits even harder because there are people like this among us. That's kind of what they're trying to go for with Joker, but I think that Todd Phillips uses cinematic techniques that set the Joker up in such a way that the audience is sympathizing with and rooting for him, even as you watch him do like horrific stuff. It's not that you want to be rooting for him, but I feel like this movie is framing itself almost as like a good triumphing over evil or a guy overcoming the obstacles, but the obstacles are like innocent people that he shoots to death. It's a very confused messaging.
Well, for me, I walked away this second time watching it, and I was just kind of like, I feel like this is like a very radical socialist's fever dream. Like the idea that rich, young stockbrokers that are in their like late 20s, like just because they are mean to a lower class citizen, if you will, on the subway, we can assume that they are just terrible people in their entire lives and they deserve to die. And it just, continues to spiral from there. And I really, really struggle with this viewpoint that the world is just this inherently nihilistically dark place that pretty much everybody is evil or broken in their own ways and deserve death. And they deserve death because of these supposed sins that they have committed.
Yeah, man, it's a struggle for sure. And I'll also say on the stockbroker front, the three guys that he murders on the subway, surprisingly very adept at musical theater. I would not have expected those three finance bros to know Stephen Sondheim to the extent that they do.
I agree with that. And I think that's like a very, it's a good call out, Bob, because to me, it points out the weirdness of this movie and how it doesn't feel like he can really stick to a tone or like an identity for the people in the movie. It just feels like he's kind of throwing a lot of stuff in there that he wants to see as a director.
Yeah. And I feel like getting back to the theme thing, like I say that it's confused because I feel like, and again, I'm not trying to say that I know Todd Phillips's mind, but it almost feels like the things that he wants us to be kind of chewing and marinating on are really underdeveloped. And the things that he doesn't intend to be poking through are the things that actually do poke through. And I mean that like thematically. So I think it's pretty clear, and you kind of called this out when you're talking about it as like a socialist fever dream. I think that this movie wants to kind of toe the line of being political and being like what it perceives to be timely. Obviously, this comes out during the first Trump administration, and you have at the beginning of the movie a lower class man whose mom only watches the news, doesn't have friends, but watches the news all day and says, this billionaire is such a good guy. He's going to save us all. He should be in government. Like, it feels like Todd Phillips is trying to hint at like a Trumpian figure.
No, Rob, definitely not.
Definitely not. But then they also do the thing of like, but we're going to set it in 1980, so it's not current times. And it feels like they're hedging. Like, if you're going to make a movie that is intending to be some kind of either social satire or just like a social commentary, you got to give it some teeth, dude. Like, make it a little more biting than this. Whether or not the audience ends up eating that up, like, you have to go whole hog on that. And it feels like at every step, they want to be controversial, but then they want to make him an empathetic figure. They want to be bold, but then they want to soften it with, traditional filmmaking techniques. They want it to be timely, but we're going to set it in the past so that it can't be a one-to-one. And it just constantly feels like a guy that wants to, he wants to muddy up the waters a little bit, but he's too afraid to do so.
I also think that this movie works way better if in pairing with what you just said, like, make it more direct, if that's what you're trying to say. Get rid of the DC of it all.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Like, don't make this a movie about Joker. Like, 100%, you could make this movie 100% the same, including all the clown stuff. He can be a clown on the streets of 1980s New York. Totally fine. But, why in the world did this have to be a comic book movie? It literally continues to make zero sense to me.
Well, okay, so this might be a good place to touch on the sequel a little bit. And I know you haven't seen the sequel. I might be one of the 5 people that don't absolutely hate the sequel. It is at least a half hour too long. It is very boring, but it is a much more direct and coherent vision from Todd Phillips. Because I think he basically thought people misinterpreted what I was trying to do with my first movie. So I'm going to use the entirety of the second movie to underscore that this man is not a hero. And in fact, he's the biggest loser on earth. And that's the second movie is punishing towards Arthur.
Oh, that's honestly, Bob, that's partially fascinating to me because I feel like you walked into that movie theater like a wolf into a sheep pen. You were just salivating at the opportunity to hate on that movie. So I'm impressed, first off, that you gave it its due process, if you will. Secondly, I don't know about you, Bob. I walked away from watching Joker thinking, man, not only is Arthur Fleck a loser, he is a sociopathic murderer that is not a hero.
Correct.
And should not be lionized.
Well, and that's getting back to your whole thing about the DC of it all. So it feels like they're trying to shoehorn in these references to Bruce Wayne, to, Thomas Wayne, to all these people. And it doesn't really work because even as the movie comes out, Todd Phillips is saying we're leaving it ambiguous as to whether this guy really is the Joker that you know, or whether he's just going to inspire the Joker. And it's so this isn't even a DC character. He's just a guy. And again, not trying to spoil the whole second movie for you, Brad. It's made very clear in the second movie, this guy's not the Joker. So what are we doing here?
I don't know if you know this, but it's next on my list. There's no way I can go another day in my life without seeing Joker. Fully adieu.
It would only be better if it was directed by Denis Villeneuve.
Only better is a correct phrasing if it was directed by Denis.
So yes, the DC of it all kind of pisses me off a little bit too, because the movie definitely works better without the DC references. However, I think we have to be honest and say this movie also doesn't gross $1 billion without the DC connection. So 100%. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
If you want to make money, make a comic book movie in the 20-teens. If you don't want to make money, make a comic book movie in the 2020s.
Yeah, that's true. They got it in right under the wire, right before cinema ended. All right, so Brad, we've kind of set up some of our trepidations with the movie, our peccadillos with the movie. I don't know, man. Where do you want to go from here? Joaquin's very good. This movie is very confused. Should we jump into things we liked? Should we keep trying to explore what it is that makes this movie not work? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious how you feel about De Niro. He's the only other actor, really in the movie. His mom is in it a little bit. I'm very curious where you're at on De Niro, on late night show host De Niro.
Well, let's talk about the De Niro performance, and let's talk about the character of Murray Franklin. So, as De Niro's gotten older, he's obviously, I think, leaned into the fact that, like, he doesn't have to memorize his lines so much anymore. He improvises a lot. This really felt like he showed up on set and it was his first time reading any of his lines. Like, there were some really awkward line readings from him in this movie. So I think it's a bad performance. I also think that he doesn't have late night host vibes at all. He's not a charismatic guy.
Mm-mm.
And why is Murray Franklin such a dick? Why is his show like set up to
So
be mean to
mean.
regular people? That's not how late night TV works.
Exactly. That to me was the biggest like bizarre decision of the writing team, where I'm like, yeah, I 100% believe that Joaquin Phoenix and Francis Conroy are like watching late night TV hosts together and falling asleep to it. That is very believable. I don't know, man. Maybe the 80s were just a lot meaner than we know about.
I guess.
Like maybe, all these late night show hosts were just being absolute D's to their guests. It seems to me, though, based on clips that I've seen from late night television of this, 60s, 70s, 80s, that these are some of the most congenial, charismatic, like fun to be around guys in the world. And De Niro is basically like if Travis Bickle got about 2 steps more charismatic.
Well, and they're obviously getting De Niro to be in the movie to have something to kind of volley against the accusations of them ripping off Taxi Driver and King of Comedy. It's like, oh, well, now he gets to be the late night host instead of the comedian. And it's like, okay, cool, you made a little meta joke, but I just don't think he's the right guy for this role, man.
Did you see that they tried to get Leo to play Arthur Fleck opposite of De Niro?
I don't know if that would have worked as well. I really think Phoenix is good for what they're trying to do with this character. Even that very first shot of him putting his makeup on in the mirror and forcing his fingers into his mouth to make himself smile and you get the teardrop. It's like, oh, I know everything I need to know about this guy.
Yeah. That scene was apparently just completely like, there's nothing in the script about him crying. Joaquin just like walked on the set, pulled his face up into a smile, and a tear fell out of his eye. And Todd Phillips was like, all right, next scene, moving on.
We got it, dude. Brad, okay, so here's where I want us to go today. I think that I still have more complaints, as always. I want to center them around the ending of the movie, and why the ending of the movie is what makes this movie so problematic. And I'm not even talking about the climactic gunshot. I'm talking about what happens after that. But in order to do that, I think this is a good time to go ahead and press pause and drink some whiskey. We're a little bit early, but if I'm going to talk any more about this movie, I need a drink, dude.
I'm with you, man. Let's do it.
At LinkedIn, we know hiring is a big deal for your small business. Sometimes it can feel a little overwhelming. LinkedIn uses data that you can't find anywhere else to give you the best candidates, all so you can feel confident you're hiring the best person for the job. And even a little hiring bliss. See why 86% of small businesses who post a job on LinkedIn get a qualified candidate within a day. Post a job for free at linkedin.com/achieve. LinkedIn, your next great hire is here.
16 years from today, Greg Gerstner will finally land the perfect cannonball. Epic splash. Unsuspecting friends. A work of art only possible because Greg is already meeting all these same people at AARP volunteer and community events that keep him active and involved and help make sure his happiness lives as long as he does. That's why the younger you are, the more you need AARP. Learn more at aarp.org/local.
All right, so today we are checking out Benromach, Speyside Single Malt Scotch Whiskey. Ben, I almost called you Ben because I'm talking about Benromach. Brad, I looked up a video of how to properly pronounce it just to make sure I wasn't going to stick my foot in my mouth here. And they have the CH at the end of Benromach is like aspirated. It's not quite as throaty as like a Hoff in Hebrew.
Yeah.
But you got to say Benromach. So I've been practicing.
I don't know, man. I like drinking my Benromach.
Benromach. 10 years. So this is a Speyside whiskey. Brad, it's been a minute since we've had a Speyside. I am very excited for this because we've always said Speyside tends to be kind of like the most like delicate of the scotches that we've tried, at least. Highland packs a little bit more of a punch. And then obviously you've got your Islay, among the other couple regions. But it's been a minute and we've never tried Benromach. This is their entry-level 10-year version. They also have, I see on their website, a 15-year, and then they've got super premium ones that are in the 20s. Brad, what can you remember about the Speyside scotches that we've tried to this point?
Man, I mean, I really don't remember much about our Speysides. Is Aberlour a Speyside?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. So I do remember really enjoying the Aberlours. For me, they had a lot of like berry notes, and like a very beautiful floral delicacy to them.
Yeah, I'm with you, dude. That's exactly what I pick up on Speysides as well. And it's funny because as we transition into the nose on this one, I actually get a little bit more like a peat smoke on this one than I think I've ever gotten on a Speyside before. Brad, I think you've tried it already. I'm drinking it live, so I've given one nosing note, but I'm going to go ahead and stick my nose in this glass while you give your notes.
Bob, I am going to give you one of the best nosing notes of all time. This reminds me of Honey Smacks.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Dude,
like,
those things were so good. But they, like, even when I ate them, I felt like it was the poorest I ever felt as a kid.
Yes,
I was
exactly.
like, this seems like poor people food. Like Great Depression era cereal.
Yeah. So Honey Smacks, quite the endorsing opinion there, Bob. There is a bunch of vanilla here. It's got like a really nice thick cherry syrupy vibe on the nose. There's some cranberry. There's some plum. Overall, it's a really pleasant nose that has me intrigued. I'm going to give it a 7.5 out of 10.
Yeah, I'm going to be just a little bit lower than you. I'm at just a 7 out of 10. When I first poured it out, I got like really bright orange and cinnamon notes that definitely had the peat smoke to it as well. And then it kind of like it started to get a couple funky notes on it. I get some almost raw, like yeasty dough on it. I get there's some kind of wood that I can't like put my finger on, but it smells like a wet, almost like balsa wood. And like it was a really weird note for me to get. I like it. I wish that it was a little more in that kind of delicate, fruity realm that we like. So I'm just at a 7 and hoping that it gets better on the taste.
I think the palate is incredible. There is plum. There's like a really nice cacao note kicking through the entire experience. It reminds me a little bit of like a Rice Krispie treat, like a sugary, grainy vibe. There is a lot of really nice flavors. It's not overwhelmingly complex, so somewhat simple in its presentation, but I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10, Bob.
Wow, this is way smokier than I would have expected just looking at the bottle and seeing the word Speyside. If you had told me that this was like a more lightly peated Islay Scotch, I'd believe you. Like, this doesn't remind me of any of the Speysides we've had to this point, which is fine. Like, you don't have to mimic other distilleries with the product you're creating. It's just kind of throwing off my mental expectations here. So I'm trying to readjust a little bit. I definitely get a much more vegetal, much more medicinal note towards the back end. It's got like that kind of woody grass type note to it. Not quite piney, but in that realm. It has that almost like ashy cigarette kind of taste towards the back as well. But I will say it's got a layer of sweetness that helps to offset that a little bit, so it doesn't tip fully bitter at the end. I like this quite a bit. I think I'm just still resetting what I was expecting it to be. I'm going to come up to a 7.5 on the palate.
I think the finish is really nice. I think that there's a little bit of oakiness to it. It gets kind of spicy at the end. There is that, for me, it turned into that vegetal note, almost into a dilly type of region. Overall, pretty good finish. Drops off a little bit from the nose and the taste. I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10.
Yeah, I like the finish. I don't really have a lot of notes on this one. It doesn't feel like a super complex whiskey to me. It does get bitter and it does get kind of overly, like it's so smoky that it almost comes back around into sourness. I don't quite know how to explain that, but like the flavors that are left a minute after on the back of my palate are turning sour. And so I think that this is kind of like, if this was an Islay Scotch, I would think it's an underwhelming experience. As a Speyside Scotch, I kind of think it's a little bit of an underwhelming experience. And it's so far out of the wheelhouse of what we've come to identify Speyside as, that it feels kind of like a bottle floating on its own out in between Speyside and the Islay region. I have no idea what to make of this. I'm going to give it a 6.5 on the finish. I'm going to give it just a 7 out of 10 on the balance. Brad, did you give a balance score?
I didn't. I'll give it a 7.5 on the balance.
Okay.
I think there's good flavors that all work together really well. And I'm a fan. I like this. Bob, I found this. It seems like you can get it for around $50 in the States, which is, I think, an eminently reasonable price for this whiskey.
Yeah. I'm going to purposely fudge my numbers, Brad. I'm going to ruin the integrity of my scoring structure here. Because right now I'm at a 28 out of 40. And I think that the price on this is extremely fair. Like, I was going to give it a 7 out of 10. It's only a 7 because I don't really like it that much. But if we're just talking like, if you had to buy this blind without ever tasting it, it's like a 9 or a 10 out of 10 on value. However, if I do give it a 7, I would be at a 35 out of 50, which is where we start recommending a product. And I don't think I recommend this one, Brad. So I'm going to give it a 6, keeping me at a 34 out of 50.
You just said this could be a 9 out of 10 value.
Yeah, it could be.
And then you gave it a 6.
Yeah, them's the breaks, dude.
Dude, this is like,
as the Joker would say, that's life.
That is life, Bob. It didn't have to be that way. You could have chosen otherwise. This is an 8.5 out of 10 on value. For $50, this is a really great single malt experience, regardless of if you are snooty about a regional flavor tasting like what you expect a regional flavor to taste like. Not that I know anybody who's like that.
Sure.
In my entire life. Bob, I am coming to a 38.5 out of 50 here.
All right, I'm at a 34 out of 50, which is bringing us to an average of a 36.25. So we still landed in the soft recommend range anyway. I will say, folks, like, just the value of it, it really is like a 9 or a 10. I just think that this was kind of a subpar drinking experience, and it's probably the first one that I wouldn't recommend that we've had in a long, long time, Brad. Just not my cup of tea this week.
Sure, man. Whatever you say, Bob. I have seized. You know how you don't always know what movies I'm going to vibe with?
Yeah.
You throw me curveballs with our whiskeys sometimes, where I'm like, yeah. Bob's like, yeah, sure. This is pretty solid whiskey at a good value. Man, don't recommend though.
I don't think it's that solid. That's the thing. Like, it's okay. I just think that, like, if you could get a bottle of like Talisker 10 for like $60 instead of this, Talisker is worlds better than this, bro.
Dude, I think the price on Talisker has gone up. I think it's like a $75, $80 bottle now. And I would agree with you. Talisker 10 is worlds better than this.
Well, yeah, but if it's $80, then I get it, man. So it sounds like you definitely recommend, though. Would you recommend trying it or buying it?
Yeah, try and buy. Great whiskey.
Try followed by buy. All right, man, I love it. Let's get back into talking about Joker. What do you say?
I would say that Talisker Single Malt 10-year-old will set you back $75 in the state of Ohio.
It's all these darn tariffs. They just didn't put it on Benromach because they don't think it's that good. That's what it was.
Tariffs.
All right, man, let's get back into talking about Joker.
Let's get to it.
Sergeant and Mr. Smith, you're gonna love this house.
Bunk beds in a closet?
There's no field manual for finding the right home. But when you do, USAA Homeowners Insurance can help protect it the right way. Restrictions apply.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit. at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
All right, everybody. That was Benromach 10. An unmitigated success at that $50 price point. Don't you think, Bob?
Whatever you say, man.
Also, I'm just going to take a second and tell you, I can't trill my R's.
That was a good one.
That might have been the absolute best I have ever done in my life. I'm very proud of myself right now.
That was a really good rolled R, man. You still missed the CH sound, but they balance out.
I was so impressed with the rolled R that I just was like, I'm not even going to try.
No,
I know I can do that.
It's like you got to quit while you're ahead, and you quit mid-word.
I sure did, Bob. I sure did. Speaking of things where I quit when I'm ahead, let's talk about 2 facts and a falsehood.
Brad is gonna try to stump you, Bob. 2 are right and 1 is wrong. 2 facts and a falsehood.
2 facts and a falsehood is the part of the show where Brad presents me with 3 items as fact about the making of this movie, one of which is a complete lie. Brad, I'm still riding high off last week's victory in Everything Everywhere All at Once, where I did not enlist our guest's help and still got it right. I'm not riding coattails this season, man. I'm doing pretty well.
Lee Diaz.
What a guy.
What a great guy.
Truly. What a guy.
Go back and listen to that episode if you haven't heard it yet.
If you've not ever purchased a bottle on Reserve Bar, I highly recommend that program. Lee, heads up the single barrel program as well. They pick absolute bangers on Reserve Bar.
Dude, excellent whiskey.
We are not being paid to say this. Not yet, at least.
This is a unasked for plug. Lee, you're welcome. You do great work, and we think you're the best.
Also, this is our pilot for advertising for you next season. So, send that money, bro.
There's more where this came from, Lee.
Let's get into 2 facts and a falsehood.
Fact number 1. Early in production, director and writer Todd Phillips wanted Willem Dafoe to narrate the film as a unreliable older Joker, with his takes on the scenes growing more manic as the film neared its conclusion. Fact number 2, early footage shows Arthur walking by a sign for Amusement Mile, Gotham City's version of Coney Island, which features prominently in the original Killing Joke graphic novel. Joker co-creator Bill Finger was partially inspired by a sign for Steeplechase Park in the real Coney Island, which featured a grotesque grinning face. Fact number 3, the Super Rats segment on Murray Franklin's show and in the news references Ratcatcher, an obscure D-list villain who could mind control rats. The character eventually made an appearance in James Gunn's The Suicide Squad.
Okay. 2 sounds the most factual, so I'm going to say 2 is a fact. Is it 1 or is it 3? I don't know anything about comic books. 3 sounds absolutely preposterous. But I can't tell if it's preposterous because you wrote it or because comic books are just dumb, Brad. That's where I'm at on that one.
I think both of those things are probably true.
So you're admitting to 3 being a falsehood?
I mean, I would never, ever admit to a falsehood, Bob.
Number 1 also sounds fictional because people have been making like fan art of Willem Dafoe as the Joker for such a long time that it almost seems like it would be kind of like when they had the Juggernaut in that one X-Men movie and they made him say I'm the Juggernaut bitch. Like it feels like it would be more of a joke than a real thing at this point if Willem Dafoe was the Joker.
Does that feel like something Ryan Reynolds would do or Todd Phillips though?
That's what I'm saying. I'm going to say number 1 is the falsehood, but I'm really going to kick myself if you admitted on air to writing number 3 and I didn't pick it. But I'm still doing it, man. I'm going to go with number 1.
Bob, I have never once in my life seen a fan art of Willem Dafoe.
Really?
As the Joker.
Oh, yeah, like all over the place, dude.
It makes a lot of sense. He would be an incredible Joker. Dude, you know how they made Logan about like old Wolverine? They could make Arthur about old Arthur Fleck and have Willem Dafoe play him.
Well, they can't if you saw what happens to Arthur Fleck at the end of the second movie. But aside from that.
Yeah, alternate universe, multiverse, Bob. They're all the rage. Fact number 1 is the falsehood.
Yes!
You got it correct.
Yes. Do you know why Willem Dafoe works so well as the Joker, Brad?
Why is that, Bob?
He has a gigantic mouth. He huge mouth. It makes so much sense as the Joker.
If that's the only qualification to be Joker, then Cameron Diaz would be an incredible Joker.
Well, that's just not kind. Come on, man.
She's a beautiful woman.
Yeah.
Also, huge mouth.
We could just have a Mick Jagger Joker. We could do a Steven Tyler from Aerosmith Joker. Just assemble a team of people with big mouths to be Joker.
Have just a bunch of different, it's a multiverse Joker movie.
This sounds terrible. We need to stop talking or Disney's going to actually make it, or Warner Brothers, or whoever the hell it is. They need content.
Yeah, they do need content. Bob, where do you think life is at for superhero films? Because it just feels like they have had their last gasp, for the time being at least.
Yeah, I still think there's probably a couple billion-dollar movies waiting to be wrung out of that whole thing. Like Deadpool this last year just made $1 billion plus.
Did it?
Yeah, dude. And it's it wasn't a good movie.
Yeah.
Most of these are not good movies. And I think the thing about superhero movies is we used to have superhero movies that we all understood would be bad, and then we just had fun with how bad they were. And now we're expected to take them all as serious works of cinema, and they're still bad. So it's cool. I just watched an unenjoyably bad movie. And I think that's kind of where I'm at with it. I don't want to follow your stupid TV shows. I don't want to go into this grim, dour experience and have it be bad. We have run our course. That's where I'm at with superhero movies.
I think that's my problem with Joker in a lot of ways, is that I think they actually, the craft of this movie is really well done, Bob.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many pieces of this film I really, truly like. It's just that the entire narrative force of this movie is completely antithetical to how I see and understand the world. And I also think that it's truly a harmful viewpoint for people to think this way about the world. I think it's bad for society.
Well, so let's hone in on that a little bit, because I've also been thinking of words like harmful and dangerous. And that's kind of why I brought up my Taxi Driver parallel in the first half, because this is not the first movie that tries to kind of gut punch you with the unhinged guy who has killed people is actually hailed as a hero. Taxi Driver does that. Clockwork Orange does that. But I think, going back to, again, what I said in the first half, those movies never pretend like their main characters are heroic, and they don't use the language of cinema to paint them as heroic. And I think this movie does. And what I can't tell is if Todd Phillips intended that, or if he accidentally made a movie that was a really good rags to riches story, but then still made that movie go where it does at the end of this. And I texted you at one point and I said, maybe it's just because we just reviewed Creed, but this feels like a really effed up version of Rocky. It's set around the same time as the original Rocky. There's that level of grime and poverty, but it definitely, here, let me pull up the text I sent you, because I phrased it so much better earlier. And so I don't know if it's just the guy on the stairs thing that you get in both Rocky or Joker, but I feel like it's presented structurally really similarly to Rocky. It's a rags to riches story. It's about a guy that overcomes the odds, and no matter how much they want you to see it as a descent into madness, the way they film the movie is like you're watching the training montage in Rocky. And so when Rocky goes and fights Apollo Creed at the end of the movie, even though he loses, you cheer for him. And in this movie, yes, you recognize on its surface that what Arthur is doing is horrific, but it's almost like they've set you up to kind of be well, maybe those people did deserve it. Those people really sucked.
Yeah.
And that's a really, really tricky and dangerous tightrope to be walking. And I don't think it does it with much grace.
Yeah. You don't know my favorite character in the movie? Thomas freaking Wayne, when he punches him in the face in the bathroom. Tell me that's not the most John Wayne moment of a modern film you've seen in a while, Bob.
Yeah, and the thing is, Thomas Wayne absolutely seemed like a huge dick and probably a bad person. You know what, though? I didn't see him murdering innocent people. So, like...
Sure didn't.
You know? That's where we're at with this movie.
If you put hands on my, 8-year-old son as well, I'd probably punch you right in the nose, too.
Yep. Well, and so that's why I wanted to talk about the ending of this movie. So... Joker goes on the Murray Franklin program after Murray indicates that he wants to basically bring him on just to make fun of him. He has completely lost touch with reality. He's murdered at least 5 people at this point and admits to murdering people on air and then shoots Robert De Niro in the head, which apparently they do not broadcast that on tape delay. It went out live to millions of people and happened during the middle of a riot, which he also inadvertently sparked. And when they saw him kill this famous celebrity, it was the spark that lit the flame that caused the revolution in Gotham. And he is now a hero amongst the disenfranchised in Gotham, leading to a maybe reign of terror. And that's where this movie gets really weird for me, man, because I don't know how you interpret the ending of this movie as anything more than a valorization of what he has done.
Dude. He's pulled out of the car like Christ.
Yeah.
Like he's laid on the hood of an ambulance or a police car and the mob gathers around him like he is their salvation.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that scene that makes me go, man, I don't care what Todd Phillips says. He knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
You can't film that scene and not have the audience see Arthur Fleck as the hero of the film.
Well, and I think it also opens up a whole bunch of unintended secondary questions of okay, let's just say that he's presenting him as a hero for these people who are already angry, and he's not necessarily condoning the violence, but he's trying to portray this is how it gets when people are beat down for too long. This is what you can come to expect.
If you want to do that, Bob, go watch Do the Right Thing.
Well, and I was gonna say I can almost understand that point of view. The problem is that you're also folding in these issues of mental health, which are done really poorly and really sloppily. And you're making this person who admits to being mentally ill, and we know probably schizophrenic and has breaks from reality, be the leader of this crusade. And so then the secondary question becomes, what is Todd Phillips trying to say, not about the Joker, but about the people who are worshiping him? Are you saying, are you ultimately saying that all of the poor, disenfranchised people who are pissed off are also mentally ill? Because that opens, it just seems like there's no good way to interpret this where characters or even Todd Phillips comes out clean at the end of it, because he writes himself such a convoluted ending that it reflects poorly on him and all the characters. I don't know if I'm expressing it exactly how I want to, but do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, 100%, dude. The reality is you can't walk away from this movie feeling clean. There is no non-dirty way to walk away from this movie. Todd Phillips, for better or for worse, I read a quote from him saying that for him, the through line of the film is kindness, and how it's if he had just one person show him true kindness, maybe this wouldn't have happened. And I'm like, dude, I'm sorry, but that's not the message of this movie. You created a grenade, you pulled the pin out, and you put it in the hands of the American public. And when it exploded, it's kind of like, oopsies.
Yeah.
I wanted to give them a flower, and instead I handed them a grenade.
Right. Well, and the metaphor I was going to use was almost like, it's like they drilled a hole into a wall that you need to stick a piece of dynamite into, and it has to be placed with precision to blow the whole thing up, to collapse it. And I feel like, to your point earlier, it is okay to make a movie where everyone in the movie is awful, and you're supposed to, as a viewer, come out of it questioning, how can humanity be so terrible to each other? There are movies that do that quite well, and they're good movies. Mm-hmm. This movie, it just wants to have its cake and eat it too. It wants to make you think man, the world is such a mean, horrible place, but then it also wants to make you feel not just empathy for the Arthur character as the person who's beat upon, but to root for him as he gets one over on these people through extremely violent and horrific means. And then it's like, well, okay, is your intent to just implicate all of us in how horrible human nature is? Because I think even that could have been done better. It's not done with tact. And in movies like A Taxi Driver, like A Clockwork Orange, you take that stick of dynamite and you get it put exactly where it needs to be. And it feels like, you use the grenade metaphor, I'll use dynamite. It feels like he's just kind of been juggling the stick of dynamite that he knows is going to explode. And he kind of like lobs it up against the wall and he's like, that's close enough. And he walks away and he lets the wall get some damage done to it, but he doesn't do it with precision. And I feel like if you're gonna juggle themes like this, you have to do it so much more tactfully than what we have here.
Absolutely. And I'm curious. I don't know if you're okay with me moving us into Let's Make It a Double.
Yep.
But I think for me...
Well, hold on. Let's play the theme song, Brad. Hold on. We're going to do Let's Make It a Double, presented by Blackwood Distilling Company.
We're near the end of the episode, so thanks for listening to the Film and Whiskey Show. Let's pair another film with this one, even if it's a struggle. It's our final segment of the day, now let's make it a double.
Let's Make It a Double is the part of the show where we pick a movie to pair up with this one to make the perfect double feature. Brad, you were on a roll. I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but you go ahead and share your double feature with us.
I'm going to pair it with a movie that I think does what Todd Phillips is trying to do. Maybe not in the same vein. The two movies are not trying to say the same thing, but I think they both have a slightly nihilistic view of the world. I'm going to pair this with American Beauty.
Oh, interesting.
I think both films have artistic merit. The story that they are trying to tell can be interesting at points. I just think that American Beauty does the whole examination of the thin veneer of the American suburban dream way better than Joker does the harshness of modern society. If you could say that that's what he's fighting against.
I think they're both trying to get at the rot that is at the core of America as they see it. But you're right. I think that American Beauty does it better. And this movie, if what you're looking at is the quote unquote rot, this movie starts with them in 1970s New York City, basically, where it's the dirtiest a city has ever been. You're already in the rot. And so it doesn't really feel like they have to work that hard to convince you of everyone's on edge. Everyone's crazy, So I'm with you, man. Now that you've explained it, I like that pairing. For mine, I'm going to go ahead and pair it with a movie that I also don't think accomplishes what it wants to in terms of its social critique. And also a movie that's been misinterpreted by bros and brought into the fold among them and kind of worshipped among them. And that is a movie called Fight Club.
Bob, you know the number one rule.
You don't talk about Fight Club. I will talk about it because I think it's not that good of a movie. And
I think you're ridiculous.
If I've ever given an opinion that most people disagree on, it's my Fight Club opinion. But I feel pretty similar about both of these movies, where it's you're really playing with fire here. And sometimes it's fun and gleeful to play with fire and not care about the consequences. But sometimes it's you can see the angry men of America wanting to hold on to this thing and misinterpret it. And that can be very dangerous sometimes. And so this reminds me of Fight Club in a lot of ways. I will say, Brad, as we segue out of Let's Make It a Double and closer to final scores, I think this is a better movie than Fight Club. And for all the complaining I've done, I think this is a pretty good movie. Would you agree?
I would agree. The first time I saw this, I probably was at a 7.5 out of 10. I think I've come down a little bit because I just have a hard time assigning value to artistic merit when I think the message itself is just gross.
Yeah.
So I think I'm going to come down a little bit. I do think that there are a lot of parts of this movie that are incredibly well done. I think that the color palette for the film is actually great. I think whoever designed the sets and the costumes They really had a good eye for what Todd Phillips was looking for. I do think Joaquin Phoenix is incredible.
I do
Bob.
too. I think he's really good, man.
I looked at the other Best Actor candidates from this year, and there are a few other performances that I think are incredible and maybe deserving of it, but it makes a lot of sense that he received this year.
All right, so before you give a final score, let's say goodbye to Let's Make It a Double, which, as always, has been brought to you by Blackwood Distilling Company. No matter what movie you pair this up with, you can always make it a double with Blackwood. And as always, if you go to bourbonoutfitter.com/filmwhiskey and use our code FILMWHISKEY at checkout, you'll receive 5% off a bottle of Blackwood.
I just had lunch with good friend of shows, Zach Johnston, who is one of the main guys at Blackwood. He has given us a few more bottles. And guys, I have to tell you, coming down the pike, they have some really awesome stuff coming. So if you haven't had Blackwood yet, make sure you try it because they are putting out incredible toasted products.
We're going to get into final scores here. I just want to remind you, Brad, that this year, 2019, the year cinema died, apparently, according to Tarantino. What a freaking lineup. Here's the best picture lineup from the 2019 squad.
Oh, dude.
Parasite wins the Oscar. Ford versus Ferrari. The Irishman. Jojo Rabbit. Joker. Little Women. Marriage Story. 1917. And Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Unbelievable lineup of movies. I forgot about Marriage Story, one of my favorite movies of all time. And then I saw it here and I was like, oh my gosh, dude.
Do you think Adam Driver, because he was also nominated, do you think he deserves it over Joaquin?
Oh, no, see, that's a question of head or heart. I would say yes, just because I love that movie so much. But I really do. I have no qualms with Joaquin winning this Oscar.
Yeah, I don't think I do either. He really poured his heart and soul in. And from what I've heard, he's like kind of a method actor, but also still like overall a really nice guy on set. Mm-hmm. So it seems like he kind of has the best of both worlds.
There you go. Just like us, with me and you as the hosts on Film and Whiskey, Brad. I'm going to give this movie a 7 out of 10. I think I could go higher. Like a 7.5 doesn't seem unreasonable to me, but I think it so mishandles the really delicate balance you have to achieve with the themes they're working with that I give it a 7 more on like ethical grounds than anything else. I don't think I can go any higher than that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. I think he's the lead guy at Ebert, wrote a review on this, and he said a phrase that I really liked. He said that this movie is unforgivably, opportunistically nihilistic. And I'm like, I think that is a perfect summation of this movie. I can't get down with it. I think like artistically, it's like an 8 out of 10. Morality and like heroization of the main character is like a 2 out of 10. I'll land at a 6, Bob.
A 6. Okay. All right. Well, we're putting ourselves in the crosshair of a bunch of bros that really love this movie because we're coming out to a 6.5 on average. But we'd like to know what you think. Joker seems to be a beloved movie by a lot of people, and it seems to be accepted into comic book canon, even though it is not even remotely related to any comic books.
Nope.
So reach out to us.
Bob,
tell us what you think.
Is this a modern classic?
Oh. You know, usually I get upset when you cut me off mid-sentence, but you've done a really good job of reminding me all the things I've forgotten today, Brad. I keep forgetting to ask the most important questions. No, it's not.
This is the closest I would come to saying yes on a movie I've scored this low, but I am going to say no more on principle than anything else. I think tons of people would say yes.
Yeah, I think principle is the thing that, like, it's unfair for me to say no, because if it's a classic, it's a classic, even if I don't like it. But I will say the goodwill towards this movie has dissipated a lot in the wake of how much people hated that second movie. I think over time, people will like revisit the first one and be like, okay, it's not so bad after all. But even the people that loved this movie hated the second one so much that I think we're in a real Joker rut right now. So for now, and to cover over the fact that this is just my own feelings, I'm going to say no. But once again, folks, you can let us know what you think of Brad and my own scoring system for whether or not something could be a classic by reaching out to us on social media. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, or YouTube @FilmWhiskey.
Or if you want to talk to us directly about it, you can join our Discord server, where we are on every single day talking to you guys, fans of the Film and Whiskey podcast. So if you want to join us, you can find a link at the end of every single one of our show notes.
Brad, we've had to reshuffle a little bit with our lineup here, and it looks like the next movie on our list is supposed to be The Wolf of Wall Street, which we will get to in time. I think I need a palate cleanser after Joker, so I'm going to call
Wolf of Wall Street isn't it?
I mean, if we were cleansing our palates with copious amounts of cocaine, then sure.
Yeah.
But I'm going to say let's slot back in Inside Out for next week. We'll do a Pixar week, and then we will return to the world of debauchery for The Wolf of Wall Street. What do you say?
I was going to say, poor Inside Out, man. It is just like squashed between two hookers right now.
You're telling me, man. All right, so next week, we're going to do some Pixar. We're going to cleanse our palates. We're going to come up for air a little bit before diving back in the cesspool. So we will see you next week for Inside Out. But until then, I'm Bob Book.
I'm Brad G.
And we'll see you next time.